The morning light filtered through the 20-foot windows of Lakeshore Manor, casting long shadows across marble floors that gleamed like frozen water. Amara Johnson moved through the east wing silently, her uniform, stark white against her dark skin, reflecting in every polished surface. 6 months she'd worked here, 6 months of memorizing schedules, documenting conversations, and becoming exactly what Charles Denmore expected, invisible. "Mrs. Johnson," the voice made her pause, cloth in hand. "The East Parlor needs attention before tonight's gathering." Amara turned to face Harrington, the head butler, whose perpetually pinched expression suggested he'd smelled something distasteful. She knew that look wasn't about the cleaning. "Of course, Mr. Harrington," she replied, her voice measured, revealing nothing of her thoughts. "I'll see to it immediately." As Harrington walked away, she caught her reflection in a gilded mirror. 30 years old, with eyes that had seen too much and shoulders that refused to bend despite the weight they carried. She adjusted her uniform collar, revealing for just a moment the small gold pendant beneath, a wedding gift from Luca Moretti. The name alone conjured warmth that sustained her through these cold halls. To Denmore and his staff, Luca was simply her driver, another service worker beneath notice. None of them knew he'd built one of Chicago's most sophisticated security firms from the ashes of his family's complicated past. None of them knew he was her husband of 3 years. And none of them certainly knew about Operation White Walls. Amara moved to the East Parlor, where crystal decanters caught sunlight and scattered it like diamonds across the room. She began dusting methodically, her movements deliberate as she activated the tiny camera hidden in her watch. Luca's latest design, undetectable to standard security sweeps. "Package secured," she whispered, the words barely audible as she adjusted a painting of Denmore's grandfather, a man who'd made his first millions during Prohibition through means suspiciously similar to his grandson's. Through her earpiece came Luca's voice, low and steady. "Copy that, Nightingale, all systems recording." Tonight's gathering wasn't just another display of wealth for Chicago's elite. According to the conversation she'd overheard between Denmore and Senator Williams last week, tonight was when the final arrangements for the Harbor Point development would be settled, a project mired in bribery, environmental violations, and the mysterious disappearance of 3 community activists who'd opposed it. "Mrs. Johnson," the sharp voice sliced through her thoughts. Charles Denmore stood at the doorway, his 6'4" frame impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than what most people in her neighborhood made in a year. At 45, his salt and pepper hair and steel blue eyes had graced magazine covers celebrating America's most successful entrepreneurs. Those eyes now narrowed at her. "My Patek Philippe is missing from my bedroom suite." Amara felt her heart rate increase, but her expression remained neutral. "This wasn't part of the plan. I haven't been in your suite today, Mr. Denmore. Perhaps nothing." He cut her off, stepping closer. "Security footage shows you were the only one who entered between 9 and 10 this morning." A lie. She'd been carefully documenting her movements, ensuring she was never alone in any room with valuables. It was the first rule Luca had established. "Sir, I was cleaning the West Wing at that time. Mr. Harrington can confirm." "Are you calling me a liar in my own home?" His voice dropped dangerously, a tactic she'd observed him using with contractors, politicians, and anyone who dared challenge him. "That watch is worth more than you'd make in a lifetime. Where is it?" Through her earpiece, she heard Luca's breathing change. "Stay calm, Nightingale. This is a setup." Amara maintained eye contact, refusing to cower. "I did not take your watch, Mr. Denmore. I've never stolen anything in my life." His laugh was cold. "Right, because people like you rise through honest means." The implication hung in the air between them, that her black skin made her inherently suspect. "I'd be happy to help search for it," she offered, knowing she needed to defuse the situation. Tonight was too important to jeopardize. "Search?" He stepped closer, invading her space. "Oh, we'll search, starting with your locker and that bag you bring every day." A cruel smile spread across his face. "And if we don't find it there, perhaps your little dwelling might need inspection." The threat was clear. Their home, the modest but cherished brownstone Luca had renovated himself, would be violated by Denmore's security team. "You have no right," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. His eyebrows rose. "Rights? In my house, I am the only one with rights." He glanced at his watch, his other watch, she noted. "The guests arrive in 4 hours. We'll continue this discussion after. Until then, I expect perfection tonight. Not a speck of dust, not a glass unfilled." He leaned in, his cologne suffocating. "And if my watch doesn't mysteriously reappear by midnight, You'll discover exactly how powerful enemies can be in this city. As he walked away, Amara exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly despite her determination to remain composed. "Luca," she whispered once Denmore was out of earshot. "He's planning something." "I heard," came the reply, tight with controlled anger. "This changes things. He's accelerating the timeline." "Should we abort?" she asked, resuming her cleaning to maintain appearances as a maid entered the adjoining room. "No," Luca's voice was resolute, "but I'm calling in additional support. We've got enough on the Harbor Point deal, but this watch accusation could be problematic." A pause. "I won't let him hurt you, Amara." She smiled faintly, remembering why she'd fallen in love with Luca despite their different worlds. Behind his tactical mind and complicated past was a man who'd moved mountains to protect those he loved. "I know," she replied, glancing out the window to the sleek black car parked at the edge of the property, where Luca sat, surrounded by surveillance equipment and determination. "But remember our agreement. Justice, not vengeance." "Sometimes they're the same thing," he answered, and she could hear the smile in his voice despite the tension. What neither of them knew was that Charles Denmore had already contacted his security team. As Amara moved through the mansion preparing for the evening, cameras tracked her every movement. In Denmore's office, a safe was being opened, not to retrieve a missing watch, but to plant evidence that would destroy more than just her reputation. By sundown, the first limousines would arrive carrying Chicago's most influential power brokers. By midnight, someone's life would be irrevocably changed, and it might not be who any of them expected. Dusk fell over Chicago's Gold Coast as the city lights began to shimmer across Lake Michigan. Inside Lakeshore Manor, Amara moved with practiced efficiency, arranging crystal flutes and sterling silver trays as the first guests arrived. The mansion hummed with quiet luxury. String quartet in the corner, champagne flowing like water, security personnel positioned discreetly at every entrance. "Senator Williams has arrived," Harrington announced to the staff, his voice carrying the reverence reserved for those who controlled the city's fate, followed by Commissioner Davis and the Caldwell family. From her position by the refreshment table, Amara observed the gathering power. These weren't merely wealthy individuals, they were architects of Chicago's future, men and women whose signatures could transform neighborhoods or condemn them to decay with a single pen stroke. Through her earpiece, Luca's voice remained a steady presence. "The FBI team is in position 3 blocks away. Remember, we need concrete evidence of the Harbor Point negotiations. If Denmore mentions the watch again, deflect but don't escalate." Amara nodded almost imperceptibly as she offered champagne to a woman dripping in diamonds, whose name she recognized from charity galas, and from documents detailing offshore accounts where construction kickbacks were funneled. "Mrs. Caldwell," Amara said politely, "would you care for champagne?" The woman barely glanced at her face. "Less bubbles in mine. The French kind gave me a headache last time." "Of course, ma'am." As Amara turned to fulfill the request, she felt it, Denmore's gaze tracking her from across the room. He stood with Senator Williams, both men laughing as if sharing some private joke, but Denmore's eyes never left her. A predator watching prey. "He's watching me," she whispered. "We're watching him too," Luca replied. "Tiago just hacked into his phone. He sent 3 messages about you in the last hour." Amara felt a chill despite the crowded room's warmth. Tiago Cortez, Luca's chief technology specialist, had once been imprisoned for hacking government databases before Luca recognized his talents and offered redemption through legitimate work. If Tiago was concerned, she should be too. The evening progressed with the choreographed elegance of the ultra-wealthy, speeches about civic duty from people who evaded taxes, toasts to Chicago's future from those who built fortunes exploiting its past. And through it all, Amara moved like a shadow, collecting not just empty glasses but fragments of conversation, each one another piece of evidence. "The zoning commission won't be an issue," Commissioner Davis assured Denmore near the fireplace, unaware of Amara adjusting a tray nearby. "After your generous donation to the education fund, they understand the importance of cooperation." Amara maintained her neutral expression even as her pulse quickened. The education fund was the cover Denmore used for bribes, documented in files she'd photographed from his office safe 3 weeks ago. "Excellent," Denmore replied, his confidence palpable. "And the environmental concerns?" Davis smiled thinly. "What environmental concerns?" "The report will show Harbor Point is perfectly suitable for development, despite the chemical waste." Denmore's question was barely audible, Reports can say whatever we need them to say, Charles. That's the beauty of having friends in regulatory positions. In her earpiece, Luca's voice was tight. Tell me you got that. Crystal clear, she whispered when she was alone in the kitchen, pretending to retrieve more hors d'oeuvres. This is bigger than we thought. It's enough, Luca confirmed. We've got the paper trail on the bribes, the falsified environmental reports, and now verbal confirmation of corruption in the Regulatory Commission. When this breaks, Mrs. Johnson, Denmore's voice from the doorway cut through their conversation. A word. Amara turned, maintaining composure despite the sudden acceleration of her heart. Denmore stood alone, his expression unreadable, crystal tumbler of bourbon in hand. Yes, Mr. Denmore. He stepped into the kitchen, allowing the door to swing shut behind him. The sounds of the party became muffled, distant. My watch, he said simply. Have you reconsidered your position? Sir, I didn't take your watch, she replied evenly. I've never... Save it. He set his glass down with deliberate control. You know what puzzles me, Mrs. Johnson? Your background check was impeccable. No criminal record, excellent references. Yet here we are. Amara remained silent, aware that Luca was hearing every word. What's even more curious, Denmore continued, is your husband's occupation. Driver, you said? The air in the kitchen seemed to thin. They'd been meticulous about Luca's cover. Yes, sir. For an executive car service. Denmore smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Interesting, because my security chief seems to think he recognized him. Something about a connection to the Moretti family some years back. He stepped closer. Chicago has a long memory for certain names, Mrs. Johnson, or should I say Mrs. Moretti. Through her earpiece, Luca's voice was steel. Don't react, he's fishing. My husband's past is his own business, Amara replied, chin raised slightly, and irrelevant to my employment here. Is it? Denmore's voice dropped. Because it seems like quite a coincidence that a former enforcer's wife ends up working in my home just as I'm finalizing the most significant deal of my career. His eyes narrowed. The watch was never missing, Amara. It was a test, one you've spectacularly failed. Before she could respond, the kitchen door swung open. Senator Williams entered, slightly flushed from alcohol. Charles, there you are. The Caldwells are asking about the Harborview units. He stopped, noticing the tension. Am I interrupting? Denmore's face transformed instantly, businessman charm replacing the menace of seconds before. Not at all, Robert. Mrs. Johnson and I were just discussing tonight's service expectations. He turned back to Amara, voice dropping. We'll conclude this conversation later. For now, return to your duties. As Denmore guided the senator back to the party, Amara exhaled shakily. He knows, she whispered. Not everything, Luca countered. He's suspicious but lacks proof. If he had evidence, he wouldn't confront you. He'd have had you removed quietly. What now? We accelerate. The FBI team is ready to move at midnight, but we need to get you out before then. Amara checked her watch. 10:37 p.m. Less than 90 minutes remained. I can't just leave, she whispered urgently. He's watching me too closely now, and if I disappear, he'll know something's wrong. The silence on Luca's end told her he was calculating, weighing options and risks the way he'd been trained to do. Then we changed strategies, he finally said. If he wants a confrontation, we'll give him one, but on our terms. When Amara returned to the main hall, the party had reached that liminal stage where inhibitions began slipping. Laughter grew louder, political discussions more candid, and the invisible line between servers and served more pronounced. She resumed her duties, hyper-aware of Denmore tracking her movements from across crowded rooms. At precisely 11:15 it happened. Denmore's security chief approached him, whispering something that drained the color from his face. His eyes snapped to Amara with such naked fury that several guests followed his gaze, conversations faltering. You, he said, voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. In my office. Now. Without waiting for a response, he strode toward the West Wing, expecting obedience. It's time, Luca said in her ear. Remember the contingency plan. I'm already inside the grounds. Amara followed Denmore, aware of curious eyes tracking her progress. The quiet murmur of speculation rippled through the guests. Entertainment for those whose lives were otherwise insulated from consequence. In his cavernous office, Denmore stood behind his mahogany desk, a surveillance tablet displaying a frozen image, Amara photographing documents from his safe date-stamped 3 weeks prior. Explain this, he demanded, voice trembling with barely contained rage. Amara glanced at the image, then back at him. The moment stretched between them, hunter and hunted, powerful and powerless, or so he believed. "I can't," she replied simply. His laugh was incredulous. "Can't or won't? Do you have any idea what I can do to you? To your husband with his complicated past?" She met his gaze steadily. "Do you have any idea what we've already done to you?" For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered across Denmore's face. "Every conversation in this house for the past 6 months," she continued, voice gaining strength. "Every illegal transaction, every threat, every bribe, all documented, all transmitted, all in the hands of federal authorities as we speak." He lunged forward, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You lying bitch!" The office door opened. Harrington stood there, expression shocked. "Sir, the guests are asking." "Get out!" Denmore roared. But the interruption had created an audience. Behind Harrington, several guests peered in, including Senator Williams and Commissioner Davis. "Charles, what's going on?" Williams asked, alarm evident. Denmore's grip on Amara's arm tightened. "This woman has been spying on me, stealing documents, working with whom, Mr. Denmore?" The new voice came from the doorway as Luca stepped into view, no longer the invisible driver but commanding attention with his presence. Federal authorities, perhaps? The room went silent as recognition dawned on several faces, particularly those connected to Chicago's older families. Denmore's face contorted with rage. "Moretti!" he spat, finally releasing Amara's arm to reach for his desk drawer. "I wouldn't," Luca advised calmly, "unless you'd like to add weapons charges to the extensive list you're already facing." Outside, blue and red lights began flashing against the mansion's windows. The hour had struck midnight, and Charles Denmore's empire was about to fall. The blue and red lights fractured through the leaded glass windows, casting prison bar shadows across Charles Denmore's ashen face. In the crystallizing silence of his office, the assembled guests froze in tableau. Senator Williams's hand arrested mid-gesture, Commissioner Davis edging imperceptibly toward the side exit, the Caldwells exchanging glances laden with unspoken calculations about potential association damage. "You have no idea what you've done," Denmore hissed, his composure cracking like thin ice beneath too much weight. His gaze darted between Amara and Luca, recognition and rage battling for dominance. Luca stepped forward, positioning himself between Amara and Denmore with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to anticipating threats. "On the contrary," he replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once made him the youngest capo in his family's hierarchy. "We know exactly what we've done. The question is whether you do." Outside, car doors slammed in rhythmic succession. Radios crackled, boots on gravel. "Federal agents!" The announcement echoed through the marble foyer, followed by the controlled chaos of a coordinated raid. Efficient commands, strategic positioning, the mansion's security personnel wisely choosing compliance over resistance. Senator Williams found his voice first. "Charles, what the hell is this about?" Hell is his political instincts already calculating the distance he could put between himself and whatever was unfolding. Denmore didn't answer. His focus remained locked on Amara, something dangerous solidifying behind his eyes. "You are nothing," he said, each word precise and venomous. "A maid, invisible. I gave you employment when others wouldn't look twice. You gave me access," Amara corrected, her voice steady despite the bruises forming on her arm. "And invisibility has its advantages. The powerful rarely guard their secrets from those they consider beneath them." The office door swung wider as 2 FBI agents entered, followed by a woman in a charcoal suit whose authority required no announcement. Special Agent Diana Chen surveyed the room with clinical efficiency, her gaze lingering momentarily on the assembled wealth before settling on Denmore. "Charles Denmore," she began, her tone matter-of-fact rather than triumphant, "I have a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of racketeering, bribery of public officials, money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit environmental crimes." Commissioner Davis took an instinctive step backward. "This is absurd. I was just leaving." "I wouldn't," Agent Chen interrupted without looking at him. "Raymond Davis, Senator Robert Williams, and Margaret Caldwell, you'll all want to remain for questioning." Her slight smile held no warmth. "Your attorneys can meet you at the federal building." The realization rippled through the room. This wasn't merely about Denmore. It was an excavation of the entire power structure. "You have no proof," Denmore stated, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Agent Chen nodded to one of her colleagues, who produced a tablet. 6 months of surveillance, financial records, recorded conversations regarding Harbor Point bribes, environmental report falsification, and the pressure campaign against community activists. She glanced at Amara with professional respect. Your confidential informant was exceptionally thorough. Denmore's expression contorted. Confidential? His gaze snapped back to Amara, comprehension dawning. You were working for them? All this time? Not initially, Amara replied, standing straighter now, her identity as Maid falling away like a discarded uniform. I came looking for evidence about what happened to Marcus Taylor. The name landed like a stone in still water. Marcus Taylor, community organizer from the South Side who had mysteriously disappeared 3 months after publicly opposing the Harbor Point development. His case had gone cold despite community outcry, written off as gang-related by a police department too cozy with developers. I don't know any Marcus Taylor, Denmore replied automatically, but his eyes flicked briefly toward his private safe. Luca noticed. So did Agent Chen. Marcus was my cousin, Amara continued, her voice carrying the weight of family justice. When the police investigation stalled, I found another way to uncover the truth. I didn't expect to discover a criminal enterprise stretching from this mansion to City Hall. The federal agents began the methodical process of securing the room, documenting the positions of everyone present. Outside, more agents were detaining staff members, securing evidence, establishing a perimeter around the estate. This is still my home, Denmore said, desperation edging into his tone as he was handcuffed. You need specific warrants for each room, each computer, all included, Agent Chen replied, handing him the document. Your former head of security was quite cooperative after we approached him last week. Apparently he drew the line at making people disappear. The blood drained from Denmore's face. As he was escorted from the room, he paused beside Amara. You think this ends with me? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Look around. For everyone you take down, 10 more are waiting. This city runs on power, not justice. Then we'll keep working our way up the chain, she replied simply. The office emptied gradually as agents escorted Denmore and the other detained guests away. Through the windows, Amara watched the party's elegant denouement. Stunned socialites being interviewed on the mansion's front steps, staff members huddled in confused clusters, journalists already gathering at the property's gates, drawn by police scanners and the scent of breaking news. When only Amara, Luca, and Agent Chen remained, the federal agent closed the door. That was unnecessarily dramatic, Chen said, though a hint of approval colored her critique. The plan was to extract you before we moved in. Plans change, Luca replied with a slight shrug. Denmore accelerated the timeline. He found security footage of Amara accessing his safe. Chen's eyebrows rose. That shouldn't have been possible. Our technical team assured me they had looped all the security feeds during your documentation activities. They did, Amara confirmed, massaging her bruised arm. Which means someone else was watching. Someone with access to a secondary security system. The implication hung in the air between them. If Denmore had a shadow security infrastructure unknown even to federal investigators, what else remained hidden? We need to check the safe, Amara said suddenly. Now before anything can be removed. Chen hesitated, professionalism warring with curiosity. That wasn't in our initial warrant parameters. Trust me, Amara insisted. When I mentioned Marcus, Denmore looked at the safe. There's something there he doesn't want found. After a moment's consideration, Chen nodded. I'll add it to the search parameters. But officially, we found it during standard evidence collection. Luca moved to the wood-paneled wall where he'd observed Denmore accessing the hidden safe weeks earlier. His fingers found the concealed mechanism, revealing the reinforced steel door embedded in the wall. We need the combination, Chen noted. No need, Luca replied, reaching into his pocket for a small electronic device, courtesy of Tiago. He attached it to the safe's keypad, and the device cycled through possibilities at inhuman speed. I don't want to know where you got that, Chen muttered, though she made no move to stop him. The safe clicked open 60 seconds later. Inside, beyond the expected cash reserves and documented bearer bonds, lay a single manila envelope. Amara withdrew it carefully, her heart pounding against her ribs as she removed the contents. Photographs, police reports, a death certificate. Marcus Taylor stared back at her from the intake photo, his face bruised but defiant. The police report detailed an alleged confrontation with Denmore's security team after Marcus was caught trespassing on the Harbor Point property. The death certificate listed cause as accidental drowning. They killed him, Amara whispered, the confirmation of what she'd feared clutching at her throat, and covered it up. Chen examined the documents, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. These are falsified police reports. That's not the standard form we received during the initial investigation. She looked up, eyes narrowed. This goes beyond Denmore. This implicates officers in the department. That's why we couldn't find justice through official channels, Lucas said, his arm encircling Amara's shoulders as she stared at her cousin's face. The system was compromised from the inside. Outside, a commotion drew their attention to the window. The assembled journalists had surged forward as Denmore emerged between federal agents, his imperious bearing stripped away by handcuffs and the harsh reality of his fall. "Agent Chen," called a voice from the doorway. Another FBI agent stood there, expression grim. "We've discovered something in the eastern grounds. Construction equipment recently used. And what appears to be..." He hesitated, glancing at Amara. "What appears to be what?" Luca demanded. "A grave site. Shallow but deliberate. Forensics team is processing now, but initial assessment suggests the remains have been there approximately 3 months. 3 months. When Marcus's drowning had supposedly occurred miles away in the lake. Amara's knees threatened to buckle. Luca's arm tightened around her, his strength flowing into her. "I want full processing of that site," Chen ordered, her voice hardened by professional outrage. "Priority handling on identification. And get me everything on Denmore's security team, especially anyone with police connections." As the agent departed, Chen turned back to Amara and Luca. "This changes the scope of our investigation. What began as corruption and environmental crimes is now potentially murder." "It was always about murder," Amara replied softly, tucking the photograph of Marcus into her pocket. "The rest was just how they maintained the power to get away with it." Through the mansion's windows, the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. News vans lined the street beyond the gates, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. Chicago would wake to a story of power and corruption laid bare, the untouchable made vulnerable, the invisible finally seen. "What happens now?" Amara asked, her gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Now," Chen replied, gathering the evidence from the safe. "We follow every thread. Denmore, the police department, city officials, the construction company. Everyone connected to Harbor Point and Marcus Taylor's death." Luca's expression darkened. "And if those threads lead to people even more powerful than Denmore?" Chen met his gaze without flinching. "Then we keep pulling until the whole tapestry unravels." As they exited the office, Amara paused in the mansion's grand foyer, taking in the opulent surroundings that had been her workplace and hunting ground for 6 months. Crystal chandeliers, marble columns, priceless art, all acquired through corruption, maintained through intimidation, now illuminated by the harsh fluorescent vests of federal evidence teams. "He never saw me," she said quietly to Luca as they walked toward the door. "Not really. Even at the end, he couldn't understand how someone like me could bring down someone like him." Luca's smile held pride tinged with the shadows of his own complicated past. "That's the advantage we've always had, Nightingale. They look, but they don't see." Outside, beyond the chaos of the raid, Chicago stirred to life. A city of neighborhoods and networks, power and resistance, corruption and resilience. And somewhere in its awakening streets, others like Denmore continued their machinations, believing themselves untouchable. They hadn't learned the lesson yet, but they would. The Peterson Federal Building hummed with controlled urgency as dawn stretched into morning. In Interview Room C, Amara sat across from Agent Chen and her colleague, Special Agent Marcus Reeves. The stark fluorescent lighting cast everyone in unflattering relief, intentionally designed to strip away comfort, to reduce everyone to their essential truths. "Start from the beginning," Agent Reeves prompted. Recorder activated, notebook open. His weathered face suggested decades spent excavating reluctant confessions and half-truths. "How did you first connect Charles Denmore to your cousin's disappearance?" Amara's fingers traced the edge of the steel table, her wedding ring catching the harsh light. 6 hours since the raid and exhaustion pressed against her bones, yet purpose kept her spine straight, her mind focused. "Marcus was leading community opposition to Harbor Point," she began, her voice steady despite the emotional undertow. "The development would have displaced hundreds of families, many who'd lived there for generations. The environmental impact alone? Let's focus on the timeline," Reeves interjected, his tone professional rather than dismissive. Amara nodded. 3 months ago, Marcus attended a community forum where Denmore was presenting revised plans. The meeting grew heated. Marcus presented evidence that the environmental impact studies had been falsified, specifically regarding chemical contamination from the old manufacturing plant on the site. And how did he obtain this evidence? Chen asked. A whistleblower from the environmental assessment company, Amara replied. Someone with a conscience. Reeves made a note. Then what happened? 2 days later, Marcus called me. He was excited, said he had concrete proof that would stop the development completely. Her voice tightened. That was our last conversation. The next day, he didn't show up for a scheduled meeting with community organizers. 3 days later, police found his car abandoned near Navy Pier, and the official investigation concluded accidental drowning. Chen filled in, consulting her notes, despite no body being recovered initially. Convenient, Amara said quietly. What made you suspect Denmore specifically? Reeves pressed. Amara met his gaze directly. Because the detective handling the case, Robert Mercer, plays golf with Denmore every Sunday. Because the Harbor Point approval process mysteriously accelerated the week after Marcus disappeared. Because 3 other vocal opponents suddenly withdrew their objections without explanation. So you decided to infiltrate his household, Chen stated, neither approval nor condemnation in her tone. I needed evidence. Amara's hands clasped together on the table. The kind that would stand up in court. The kind the system couldn't ignore or bury. And your husband's involvement? Reeves asked, eyes flicking to the one-way glass where Luca was likely watching. A ghost of a smile touched Amara's lips. Luca has specialized skills and contacts. Former enforcement for the Moretti family, Chen clarified, though there's no record of criminal charges. That life is behind him, Amara said firmly. He built a legitimate security consulting business. When I told him about Marcus, he offered resources I couldn't access alone, including surveillance equipment, Reeves noted, and Tiago Cortez, a convicted hacker, a reformed security specialist, she corrected, who helped ensure the evidence we gathered remained secure. The questioning continued for another hour, methodical, detailed, occasionally circling back to earlier points seeking inconsistencies that weren't there. Amara understood the process. They needed her testimony to be unimpeachable when the case eventually went to trial. Finally, Chen closed her notebook. Mrs. Moretti, what you and your husband did was technically illegal surveillance. Under normal circumstances, that evidence would be inadmissible. Amara tensed. However, Chen continued, given the extent of corruption uncovered and the death of your cousin, the U.S. Attorney's Office is preparing immunity agreements in exchange for your continued cooperation as witnesses. Relief loosened the knot between Amara's shoulders. What about the remains found on Denmore's property? Preliminary forensics confirm they're human, Reeves answered, his expression softening slightly. Full identification will take time, but the physical characteristics match Marcus Taylor's description. The confirmation, though expected, hit Amara with physical force. Her cousin, brilliant, passionate, fearless Marcus, buried like garbage on his enemy's land. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. And Denmore? She asked when she could trust her voice again. Currently in holding, awaiting arraignment, Chen replied. No bail recommendation, given the severity of charges and flight risk. His attorneys are already flooding us with motions, but with the evidence recovered, they're just buying time. What about the others, Senator Williams? Commissioner Davis? Chen and Reeves exchanged glances. The subtle communication of partners weighing disclosure boundaries. We're pursuing multiple threads, Chen said carefully. The Harbor Point investigation has expanded significantly. Translation: bigger fish were being circled. The interview concluded with logistical details, protection arrangements, next steps, the timeline for formal statements. As Amara was escorted out, she caught sight of Luca waiting in the hallway, his powerful frame incongruous against the governmental beige walls. Despite the circumstances, warmth flooded her chest at the sight of him. You okay? He asked simply when she reached him. I will be, she replied, the truth in its purest form. Agent Chen approached them, tablet in hand. We need to discuss security arrangements. The news about Denmore's arrest has broken across all major networks. Your involvement hasn't been leaked yet, but it's only a matter of time. We have our own security, Luca stated. Not a challenge, but a fact. Chen nodded, unsurprised. I assumed as much, but Denmore has connections beyond Chicago. International investments, partners with significant resources. Until we map the full network, you should consider yourselves at risk. the warning was unnecessary. Luca had already activated protective protocols the moment Denmore realized Amara's true purpose. Former associates, men and women who owed him their freedom, their second chances, had been deployed to secure their home, monitor potential threats, establish emergency extraction plans if needed. "We appreciate the concern," Amara said, more diplomatic than her husband. "But we've prepared for this possibility since day one." Chen studied them both, professional assessment in her gaze. "You know," she said finally, "there are legitimate ways to pursue justice. Legal channels. We tried those first," Amara replied without heat. "They failed my cousin. They've failed countless others." Something unspoken passed between the women, recognition of a shared truth about systems and their imperfections, about the gap between law and justice. "Keep us informed of your movements," Chen said finally. "And if anything suspicious occurs, anything at all, contact me directly." She handed Amara a card with a personal number handwritten on the back. As they left the federal building, the mid-morning sun cast their shadows long across the plaza. News crews clustered near the entrance, but a side exit allowed them to reach the waiting SUV unnoticed. Tiago sat behind the wheel, his usual technological array temporarily abandoned for driving duty. "All good?" he asked as they slid into the back seat. "As expected," Luca replied. "Take us to the safe house, not home. Too much attention on our address right now." Tiago nodded, pulling smoothly into traffic. Chicago flowed around them, a city continuing its business despite the seismic shifts occurring beneath its political foundations. On street corners, newspaper headlines screamed Denmore's downfall. On office televisions visible through windows, talking heads dissected the implications for upcoming development projects, political alliances, campaign contributions. "They're calling it the biggest corruption scandal since Silver Shovel," Tiago noted, referencing the infamous 1990s FBI sting that had ensnared city officials. "Though this one goes deeper, I think. More blood on the hands." Amara stared out the window as they passed the edges of what would have been Harbor Point, 30 acres of prime lakefront property, where Marcus had seen not luxury condominiums, but displacement, environmental injustice, and the continuing erasure of communities like the one they'd grown up in. "He was right all along," she said softly. "The soil tests, the water samples, all of it." Luca took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "And now everyone knows it." The safe house, a converted warehouse in an industrial district undergoing sporadic gentrification, had been prepared days earlier. Reinforced doors, security protocols, supplies for a potential extended stay. Luca's team had transformed the upper floor into a livable space without compromising defensive capabilities. As night fell over the city, Amara stood at the windows overlooking the distant downtown skyline, the skyscrapers illuminated against the darkness. Her phone had been buzzing steadily, journalists who had somehow obtained her number, distant relatives connecting dots between her and Marcus, even former colleagues from her previous job expressing shock at her appearance in background footage from the raid. "You should sleep," Luca said, appearing beside her with a mug of tea. His suit jacket had been discarded hours ago, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate tattoo that mapped his family history across his forearm. Names and dates, losses and redemptions. "Too wired," she admitted, accepting the tea. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Marcus. Not how he was, but how they left him. Discarded, unmourned." Luca didn't offer empty reassurances. It was one of the things she loved most about him, his willingness to stand with her in difficult truths, rather than trying to shield her from them. "We'll give him justice," he said instead, certainty in his voice. "It won't bring him back, but it matters all the same." Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Mrs. Moretti." The voice was unfamiliar, male, carefully modulated. "My name is Victor Crane. I believe we have mutual interests to discuss." Amara's spine straightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who appreciated your work with Charles Denmore." A pause, measured and deliberate. "And someone who can provide information about others involved in your cousin's death." Luca, noticing her tension, moved closer. She activated speakerphone. "What kind of information?" she asked cautiously. "The kind that doesn't exist in official records. The kind that connects Denmore to higher powers. People who considered your cousin a minor inconvenience to be eliminated in service to a much larger plan. Why would you share this with me?" The question hung in the air for 3 heartbeats. Because Harbor Point was never about luxury condominiums or even profit, Crane replied finally. It was about strategic infrastructure control, water access, surveillance capabilities, things that interested certain international partners whose investments in Chicago extend beyond real estate. Luca and Amara exchanged glances, the implications crystallizing between them. You're suggesting a national security dimension, Luca stated, joining the conversation. Precisely, Mr. Moretti. Denmore was merely the public face. The money behind him comes from sources the FBI isn't equipped to touch, not without evidence they don't know exists. And you have this evidence? Amara asked. Some, enough to point you toward more. Another calculated pause. I'll contact you again with a secure meeting location. Come alone, Mrs. Moretti. This extends beyond what even your husband's connections can protect you from. The call ended abruptly. It's a trap, Luca said immediately, security instincts flaring. Someone connected to Denmore trying to draw you out. Maybe, Amara acknowledged. But what if it's not? What if Marcus stumbled onto something bigger than corrupt real estate deals? Then we approach cautiously, with backup, with protocols. His hands framed her face, eyes fierce with protective love. We've come too far to be reckless now. Beyond the windows, Chicago continued its nocturnal rhythm, a city of secrets and whispers, of power exchanged in shadowed corners and bloodshed in forgotten places. The victory they'd claimed with Denmore's arrest now seemed smaller, a single battle in a war whose true dimensions remained obscured. We should tell Agent Chen, Amara said finally. Tomorrow, Luca agreed. After we've had time to verify this Crane person, Tiago can start digital reconnaissance tonight. As if summoned by his name, Tiago appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, expression uncharacteristically somber. You need to see this, he said, activating the warehouse's main screen. Breaking news banner. Helicopter footage of police vehicles surrounding a downtown parking garage. The somber-faced anchor's voice filled the room, confirming that Charles Denmore, the Chicago developer arrested this morning on corruption charges, has been found dead in what authorities are calling an apparent suicide. Sources close to the investigation report that Denmore was discovered hanging in his cell despite being under suicide watch. The floor seemed to shift beneath Amara's feet. Not grief, never that, but the sickening recognition of power asserting itself, of loose ends being cauterized. Suicide, Luca repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. Convenient timing, Tiago added grimly, right after he started talking to prosecutors about a deal. Amara's phone buzzed one final time that night. A text message from an unknown number, different from Crane's call. This is just the beginning. Choose your next steps carefully. Outside, a distant siren wailed through the Chicago night, a city holding its breath, waiting to see what dawn would reveal. Morning light filtered through the warehouse's industrial windows, casting geometric patterns across the concrete floor. Amara stood in the makeshift command center Tiago had established overnight, screens displaying news feeds, surveillance camera access points, and the digital breadcrumbs of Victor Crane's identity spread across the workspace like puzzle pieces awaiting assembly. Nothing, Tiago announced, frustration evident as he pushed away from his keyboard. 3 empty energy drink cans testified to his sleepless efforts. Crane's digital footprint is either professionally scrubbed or artificially constructed. No social media, no property records, no employment history I can access. Military background? Luca suggested, studying the single grainy image they'd managed to extract from a traffic camera near the cell tower that had pinged during Crane's call. Possibly, Tiago conceded. The call routing techniques suggest training beyond civilian applications. Multiple bounces, voice modulation, the works. Amara's attention shifted to the center screen, where CNN continued its breathless coverage of Denmore's suicide. The official narrative was already crystallizing despite its obvious flaws. The disgraced billionaire, facing ruin and imprisonment, had chosen death over disgrace. A tragic but unsurprising end to a fall from grace. They're burying it, she said quietly, just like they buried Marcus. The door opened as Maya Rodriguez entered, Luca's head of physical security and former Marine Corps intelligence officer. Her expression was professionally neutral, but the tension in her shoulders spoke volumes. We've got movement, she reported. 2 unmarked sedans circled the block twice in the last hour. Different drivers, same passenger. Luca straightened. Government. Not local PD or FBI, we know their vehicles. These had diplomatic plates, partially obscured. The implications hung in the air. Diplomatic immunity, foreign interests. the boundaries of jurisdiction becoming increasingly blurred. Amara's phone rang, the secure line they'd established after disconnecting their personal devices. Agent Chen's number. "We need to meet," Chen said without preamble when Amara answered. "Not at the federal building, somewhere secure and private." "You've seen the news," Amara stated rather than asked. "I've seen more than the news," Chen replied, her usually measured voice tight with controlled anger. "The case is being reassigned. Evidence is being reclassified. Something's happening that goes beyond standard procedure." "When and where?" "Garfield Park Conservatory, the Fern Room. 1 hour. Just you and your husband." Amara glanced at Luca, who nodded his agreement after a moment's consideration. "We'll be there," she confirmed. As she ended the call, Tiago swiveled in his chair. "I don't like it. Too many variables, too public." "That's precisely why it works," Luca countered. "Public enough for safety, but with enough ambient noise to prevent eavesdropping." "Chen's smart. Or compromised," Maya suggested bluntly. "Denmore's death changes everything. We don't know who's pulling strings now." The possibility couldn't be dismissed. After Marcus, after Denmore's too convenient suicide, trust had become a luxury none of them could afford. "We go prepared," Luca decided. "Maya, coordinate surveillance of the conservatory perimeter. Tiago, activate remote audio capture. We meet Chen, but with safeguards." 40 minutes later, Amara and Luca entered the conservatory through separate entrances, timed arrivals creating the appearance of coincidence rather than coordination. The tropical humidity embraced them as they navigated toward the Fern Room, a verdant cathedral where prehistoric plants created natural privacy screens and the constant hush of water features masked conversation. Agent Chen sat alone on a bench surrounded by towering ferns, her federal credentials nowhere in sight. In jeans and a simple jacket, she looked like any weekend visitor seeking respite from Chicago's fading winter. "Thank you for coming," she said as they approached, her eyes continuously scanning their surroundings. "I'm sorry for the cloak and dagger routine, but normal channels are compromised." "Denmore's death wasn't suicide," Luca stated, cutting to the core. Chen's expression confirmed it without words. The surveillance footage from his cell block experienced a technical malfunction for precisely 11 minutes. When it resumed, he was already dead. The guards assigned to the high-security wing were both replacements. The regulars called in sick simultaneously. "And the investigation?" Amara asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Being handled internally, quietly." Chen's knuckles whitened as her clasped hands tightened. "My superior instructed me to focus on processing the financial crimes evidence and to leave the death inquiry to the corrections department." "Containment," Luca observed. "Exactly." Chen leaned forward slightly. "But that's not all. This morning I was informed that the remains found on Denmore's property are being transferred to a different facility for specialized analysis. When I requested the chain of custody documentation, I was denied access." The implications chilled Amara, despite the conservatory's warmth. Marcus's body, the physical evidence of murder, being removed from standard protocols. "Someone sanitizing the investigation," she said, the realization crystallizing, narrowing it to financial crimes that can be attributed solely to Denmore, while eliminating the connections to murder and higher-level involvement. Chen nodded grimly. "The Harbor Point development is being rebranded and fast-tracked under new management. The environmental concerns have been reassessed and deemed minimal." "How is that possible?" Amara demanded. "We had documented proof of contamination, of falsified reports, documents that are now classified as part of an ongoing national security review." Chen's voice dropped further. "Yesterday afternoon, 2 men from an agency that shall remain nameless visited our offices. They removed certain files under executive authority." Luca's expression darkened. "The system protecting itself." "Parts of it," Chen corrected. "Not everyone is complicit. That's why I'm here, against direct orders to cease contact with you both." Around them, tourists wandered among the ferns, oblivious to the conversation unfolding about power, corruption, and blood. A child laughed somewhere nearby, the sound incongruously bright against the gravity of their discussion. "We received a call last night," Amara said carefully, watching Chen's reaction, "from someone named Victor Crane, claiming to have information about Marcus's death and connections beyond Denmore." A flicker of recognition crossed Chen's face before her professional mask reasserted itself. "That name means something to you," Luca observed. Chen hesitated, internal calculation visible in her eyes. "Victor Crane was flagged in our database when the Harbor Point investigation began. former intelligence operative, specialized in economic espionage and counterintelligence. He dropped off the radar 3 years ago after allegedly discovering evidence that certain American infrastructure projects were being influenced by foreign interests. And you didn't think to mention this connection earlier? Luca's tone sharpened. Because it wasn't confirmed, Chen replied evenly. Crane is considered highly unreliable by official channels, possibly delusional, possibly compromised. His allegations were investigated and dismissed. By whom? Amara pressed. By the same agencies now classifying your evidence. Chen let the implications settle. If Crane contacted you, it means either he sees an opportunity in Denmore's downfall or he knows something legitimate that powerful people want suppressed. Amara finished. Chen neither confirmed nor denied, her silence its own form of communication. Did he arrange a meeting? She asked instead. He said he would, Amara answered, careful not to reveal that they were still waiting for the follow-up contact. If he does, I need to know when and where. Chen's expression softened slightly, human concern breaking through her professional facade. Not officially, nothing goes in reports, but you need backup that isn't connected to your husband's network. Someone inside the system who can still access resources if things go sideways. The offer hung between them, an alliance neither fully official nor completely outside the bounds of law, the gray territory where sometimes justice found footing when institutions failed. Why risk your career for this? Luca asked, professional suspicion an ingrained habit. Because I joined the FBI to uphold the law, not help bury inconvenient truths. Chen's answer came without hesitation. And because 6 years ago, my sister's environmental activism against a similar development in California led to her being blacklisted from her profession. Different players, same playbook. Personal motivation, skin in the game. It made her more trustworthy, not less. We'll keep you informed, Amara decided, Luca's slight nod confirming his agreement. But we do this carefully. No direct communication devices, no electronic trails. Agreed, Chen replied. There's a coffee shop on Division Street. Groundwork. The barista with the geometric tattoos is my cousin. Leave messages with her, old school. As they prepared to leave, separately as they had arrived, Chen caught Amara's arm gently. One more thing you should know, she said, voice barely above a whisper. The night before Denmore died, he requested a private meeting with the U.S. attorney. It never happened, but he left a message that was logged into evidence. He claimed he had information about something called Project Watershed, said it would explain everything about Harbor Point and similar developments in 6 other cities. Project Watershed, Amara repeated, committing it to memory. Be careful who you share that name with, Chen warned. The last person who investigated it was Marcus Taylor. The revelation struck Amara with physical force, confirmation of what she had suspected, that her cousin's death was about more than one corrupt developer's greed. Marcus had uncovered something systemic, something with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of power. Outside the conservatory, Chicago continued its weekend rhythms. Families in the park, shoppers on Michigan Avenue, tourists at Navy Pier. The ordinary pulse of a city unaware that beneath its surface, invisible currents of power were shifting in response to disruption. By mid-afternoon, sequestered back in the warehouse, Tiago had added Project Watershed to his search parameters. Information trickled in. Fragments, whispers, redacted documents. Nothing concrete, but enough to establish patterns. It's not just Chicago, he reported, connecting data points across his screens. Similar waterfront developments in Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, all Great Lakes cities, all with environmental concerns mysteriously resolved, all fast-tracked through regulatory hurdles. Water, Amara said, the significance dawning. The Great Lakes contain 20% of the world's fresh surface water. In an era of increasing water scarcity, whoever controls access to the Great Lakes controls a strategic resource, Luca finished. Geostrategic implications immediately apparent from his family's old-world understanding of power dynamics. Maya entered the room, expression grim. We've got a problem. The surveillance team identified federal agents establishing positions around the perimeter. Not Chen's people. Different operational signatures. How many? Luca asked, instantly alert. At least 6 that we've confirmed. 2 sniper positions on adjacent rooftops. Communication patterns suggest a containment operation, not an immediate breach. Amara felt ice crystallize in her veins. They're waiting for something or someone. As if summoned by her words, The secure phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Crane, midnight, Navy Pier Warehouse 17. Come alone or don't come. Last chance for the truth about your cousin. Luca read the message over her shoulder, jaw tightening. It's an obvious trap. Or our only opportunity to get answers before we're contained, Amara countered. If they're watching us now, they'll move soon. Whatever Crane knows, whatever Marcus discovered, this might be our only window. The debate that followed was intense but efficient. Each option weighed against increasingly limited time. The federal presence outside meant official channels had categorized them as threats rather than witnesses. Chen's warning about evidence disappearing suggested a comprehensive cleanup operation underway. By dusk, they had formulated a plan, high risk but with built-in contingencies. Tiago would maintain technological overwatch from a mobile command vehicle. Maya's team would establish counter-surveillance and extraction protocols. Amara would make the meeting with Luca positioned as invisible backup. If it goes wrong, Luca said as they made final preparations, his voice tight with the strain of accepting Amara's insistence on taking point. You abort immediately. No heroics. No martyrdom for Marcus. She met his gaze steadily. I didn't come this far to throw it all away now, but I won't stop until we have the full truth. He nodded once. Acceptance rather than approval. In their years together, he'd learned that her determination, once fixed on a course of justice, was as immovable as his own protective instincts. As midnight approached, Chicago's skyline glittered against the darkness, the city's surface beauty masking the corruption being excised beneath. On Navy Pier, late-night revelers were oblivious to the shadow war unfolding in their midst, power protecting itself, truth fighting for oxygen, justice navigating the narrow spaces between. Amara moved through the night, no longer a maid but a hunter, no longer invisible but illuminated by purpose. Whatever awaited in Warehouse 17, answers or ambush, she advanced toward it, Marcus's memory propelling her forward into the heart of the conspiracy that had claimed his life. Behind her, unseen but ever present, Luca followed. Shadow protecting shadow, justice seeking justice, love ensuring that whatever truth emerged tonight, Amara would survive to bring it into the light. The abandoned warehouse loomed against the midnight sky, its weathered facade revealing decades of neglect. Once the bustling heart of Chicago's shipping industry, Warehouse 17 now stood as an industrial ghost, a shadow of commerce past awaiting inevitable demolition or luxury conversion. The perfect neutral ground for dangerous truths. Amara approached from the south side, the gentle lapping of Lake Michigan against the pier creating a rhythmic backdrop to her measured breaths. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest, to walk deliberately into what could easily be a trap, to risk everything for answers that might not come. I'm in position, Luca's voice murmured through her nearly invisible earpiece. Northeast corner, second level, full visual on the main floor. Perimeter sweep complete, Maya added from her position coordinating their security team. 2 unmarked vehicles 3 blocks south, federal signatures. They're maintaining distance for now. Thermal imaging shows 1 figure inside, Tiago reported from the mobile command center. Central area, seated. No weapons detected, but the building materials are interfering with clear readings. Amara paused at the rusted side entrance, hand resting momentarily on the door. Marcus walked into situations like this believing truth was protection enough, she said quietly. I won't make the same mistake. She pushed the door open, the protesting hinges announcing her arrival. The warehouse interior spread before her, vast, cavernous, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through broken windows and a single battery-powered lantern in the center, where a figure sat waiting. Mrs. Moretti. The voice matched the phone call, measured, controlled, revealing nothing beyond its words. Right on time. Amara moved forward cautiously, stopping 20 feet from the seated man. Victor Crane appeared to be in his 50s, his face weathered by experience rather than time, military posture, observant eyes that cataloged every detail of her appearance, the calculated neutrality of someone accustomed to living between worlds. You have information about my cousin, she said, bypassing pleasantries, and about Project Watershed. If Crane was surprised by her knowledge of the project name, he concealed it perfectly. Direct. Good. He gestured to a chair across from him. We have limited time before our respective watchers decide to intervene. Amara remained standing. Why contact me? Why now? Because you've already done what few manage. Disrupted a node in the network without being immediately neutralized. His expression remained impassive, but something like respect flickered in his eyes. That makes you valuable and potentially useful, and I'm not interested in being anyone's asset, Amara replied coldly. I want justice for Marcus. I want the truth about what he discovered. Crane studied her for a moment before reaching slowly into his jacket. Luca's voice immediately tensed in her ear. Movement, hand in jacket, be ready to drop. Ready. But what emerged was a small digital drive, which Crane placed on the crate between them. Marcus Taylor wasn't the first person to notice the pattern, Crane began, his voice dropping to ensure it wouldn't carry beyond their immediate vicinity. For the past decade, strategic waterfront properties throughout the Great Lakes have been systematically acquired through a network of shell companies. Different developers, different cities, same ultimate beneficiaries. Foreign interests, Amara said, recalling their earlier speculation. Crane nodded once. A consortium representing several nations experiencing critical water shortages. Their long-term strategy isn't about luxury condos or commercial developments. It's about establishing infrastructure and legal precedent for future water extraction and export. The pieces aligned with what they had already begun to assemble: the environmental report falsifications, the political pressure, the eliminated opposition. Project Watershed is the operational name for this acquisition network, Crane continued. Your cousin discovered financial links between Denmore and overseas holding companies. He was gathering evidence of environmental manipulation, not just contamination being hidden, but contamination being strategically created to depress property values for targeted acquisition. Amara felt sick. They poisoned communities deliberately, limited contamination, carefully controlled, just enough to trigger property devaluation without creating a Flint-level crisis that would draw federal intervention. Crane's clinical description couldn't fully mask the disgust underneath. Marcus found the pattern, started connecting developers across multiple cities. He was building a case showing coordinated action, and they killed him for it, Amara stated, the confirmation of her suspicions bringing no satisfaction. Denmore's security team intercepted him photographing documents at the Harbor Point site office, but the order came from higher up the chain. Crane tapped the drive on the table. This contains everything Marcus had compiled, plus my own additions, financial trails, meeting records, communications between project coordinators, enough to expose the entire operation. Amara stared at the small device, containing both her cousin's last work and potentially the means to bring his killers to justice. Why give this to me? You could take it to authorities yourself. A bitter smile crossed Crane's face. I tried that route 3 years ago, was promptly investigated for mental instability, stripped of clearance, and nearly disappeared myself. The authorities you imagine as separate from this are often the same people protecting it. Project Watershed has political cover at levels that make conventional justice impossible. Then what's the point? Amara asked, genuine frustration breaking through her careful control. If the system is this corrupted, what can I possibly do with this information? You've already demonstrated that capability, Crane replied. You worked outside conventional channels, created irrefutable evidence, forced public exposure that couldn't be contained through normal means. He leaned forward slightly. There are journalists not yet compromised. There are principled officials like your FBI contact, Chen. There are international courts beyond U.S. jurisdiction. Amara's pulse quickened. You've been watching us closely. Since Denmore's arrest, your methods were impressive. In her earpiece, Tiago's voice cut through. Movement on the perimeter. The federal vehicles are mobilizing. Simultaneously, Maya. Second team approaching from the waterside. 2 boats, minimal lights. Tactical configuration. They were out of time. Take it, Crane said, pushing the drive toward her. Whatever you decide to do with it, act quickly. After tonight, both of us become considerably harder to find. Amara reached for the drive, but as her fingers closed around it, the warehouse floodlights blazed to life. Blinding, disorienting light pouring through windows and doorways. Federal agents, nobody move! The command echoed through bullhorns as doors burst open on multiple sides. The choreographed precision of a planned operation unfolding with mechanical efficiency. Amara, northwest exit now, Luca's voice commanded through her earpiece. Maya's team has an extraction path clear, but before she could move, Crane was on his feet remarkably fast for his age. Different exit, he said tersely. Follow me. We have approximately 12 seconds before they establish interior position. Decision point. Trust this stranger or follow the extraction plan. The drive clutched in her palm seemed to pulse with the weight of its contents. Marcus's legacy, the truth they'd fought to uncover. "Luca," she said into her comm. "Change of plan. Following Crane. Track my signal." Without waiting for his response, which would inevitably be objection, she followed Crane as he moved with practiced efficiency toward a section of flooring that appeared identical to the rest. He slid aside a concealed panel revealing a narrow passage downward. "Maintenance access," he explained tersely. "Connected to the original pier infrastructure. Thermal imaging can't penetrate." Behind them, tactical teams breached the main doors, voices shouting commands that echoed through the cavernous space. No time for doubt. Amara descended into darkness, Crane following and sealing the entrance behind them. The passage was narrow, damp with lake water seepage, illuminated only by Crane's small tactical light. They moved quickly, the sounds of the raid above fading behind them. "Your husband will be concerned," Crane noted as they navigated the tunnel. "He's used to it," Amara replied, her mind already calculating next steps, contingencies, the implications of the information she now carried. The tunnel eventually opened into a maintenance room for the pier's water systems. Crane moved to an equipment panel, retrieving a backpack hidden behind it. "Alternate identification," he said, handing her a sealed package. "Passport, credentials, currency. Established and verified, not traceable to me or my former agencies." Amara stared at the package without taking it. "I'm not disappearing. That's not why I did this." Crane's expression hardened. "Then you misunderstand the forces now aligned against you. With that drive in your possession, you're no longer just a witness or informant. You're an active threat to multiple governments and billions in strategic investments. All the more reason to use proper channels now," she countered. "Mass exposure rather than shadows." Before Crane could respond, the maintenance room door opened. Both froze, reaching instinctively for weapons neither had drawn. Luca stood in the doorway, tension radiating from his powerful frame, eyes quickly assessing for threats. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, gaze fixed on Amara. "I'm fine," she assured him, "and I have what we came for." Luca's attention shifted to Crane, the predatory wariness of one operative recognizing another. "The federal raid team has secured the warehouse. They're expanding the search perimeter." Crane nodded. "Expected. They'll have transportation coverage as well. Airports, train stations, major highways. Which is why we're not running," Amara stated firmly, decision crystallizing. "Running validates their narrative, makes us fugitives, discredits whatever we release." "She's right," Luca said, his tactical mind already processing implications. "We need to use their momentum against them. Force exposure on our terms." Crane studied them both, reassessment visible in his calculating gaze. "You have a counter-operation in mind." It wasn't a question, but Amara answered anyway. "Since the moment Denmore died, we anticipated escalation. The plan had been developed as contingency, the glass break option if normal channels became compromised. Tiago had established secure data distribution networks. Maya had coordinated with trusted journalists and international legal observers. Evidence had been packaged, authenticated, and prepared for maximum impact. What they had lacked was the missing piece, the broader context and confirmation that would transform Denmore's corruption from local scandal to international conspiracy. The drive in Amara's hand provided exactly that. "We need 12 hours, she told Crane. "Time to integrate this new information, authenticate it, and prepare distribution through pre-established channels." "You won't have 12 hours, he warned. "Not with the resources they're deploying." "We don't need to hide completely," Luca explained. "Just create enough confusion and misdirection to buy time." Understanding dawned in Crane's eyes. "You already have a diversion strategy." Luca's slight smile was confirmation enough. Years in his former life had taught him the value of strategic distraction, how to make authorities look in one direction while operating in another. "Can your former employers identify your involvement in this?" Amara asked Crane. He considered this. "Not definitively. I've maintained necessary operational separation." "Then you have choices," she continued. "Disappear now with your prepared exit strategy, or join forces temporarily to ensure this information reaches the right channels." The calculation was visible on his face, years of ingrained caution warring with the opportunity to finally achieve what he'd been working toward since his own exile from the system. 12 hours, he finally agreed. "Then we go separate ways regardless of outcome." The maintenance tunnel provided exit to a service area 3 blocks from the pier. As they emerged into the night, Chicago's skyline glittered with deceptive tranquility, a city of power and secrets, about to face unwelcome illumination. Maya's team created the necessary confusion, decoy movements, digital ghosts. Attention pulled in multiple directions while Amara, Luca, and Crane reached the secondary safe location Tiago had prepared, a nondescript office space registered to a shell company within Luca's legitimate business network, equipped with independent power and communication systems. Through the pre-dawn hours, they worked with focused intensity. Tiago authenticated Crane's data, cross-referencing with their existing evidence. The picture that emerged was more comprehensive than even they had anticipated. A decade-long operation spanning national borders, corrupting officials, eliminating opposition, all in service to controlling access to the world's largest freshwater system. Marcus saw the pattern first. Amara said softly as satellite images displayed similar development projects across multiple Great Lakes cities. He connected the environmental manipulation to the property acquisitions, and paid with his life for that insight, Crane added. But he ensured the evidence survived. By noon, the integrated files were prepared for distribution, secure, authenticated, untraceable to their current location. The list of recipients represented a global fail-safe: investigative journalists across 3 continents, international prosecutors, environmental advocacy organizations, uncorrupted officials within relevant agencies. Once we initiate distribution, there's no calling it back, Tiago warned as the final preparations were completed. Every contingency we've accounted for, plus some we probably haven't, will activate simultaneously. Amara looked to Luca, the weight of the moment suspended between them. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about power, resources, the future of communities across an entire region. The consequences would be far-reaching, the backlash severe. Distribute it, she decided, her voice steady with conviction. All channels, simultaneously. Tiago initiated the sequence, digital packages flowing outward through secure channels, redundant systems ensuring no single point of failure could contain the exposure. Within minutes, the first acknowledgements began returning, secure receipts confirming successful delivery. It's done, Tiago announced, satisfaction evident despite his exhaustion. Distribution complete. First journalistic confirmations already coming in. On nearby screens, news alerts began appearing, initially tentative, then with increasing urgency, as major outlets began reporting on the massive data leak exposing Project Watershed. Careful editorial language rapidly gave way to more direct descriptions as multiple sources confirmed the authenticity of the documents. Chicago at center of international water resource conspiracy. Federal investigation compromised by high-level interference. Multiple cities affected by strategic contamination scheme. Development projects across Great Lakes linked to foreign water acquisition strategy. Crane watched the unfolding coverage with guarded satisfaction. The momentum is building faster than they can contain it. Too many independent sources confirming simultaneously. And Marcus's name? Amara asked, scanning headlines for mention of her cousin. Tiago nodded toward one screen where a Chicago Tribune breaking story specifically highlighted murdered environmental activist Marcus Taylor as the initial whistleblower whose work had exposed the conspiracy. He's there, Tiago confirmed, front and center just as we specified in the distribution package. His evidence given priority authentication marking. Something tight in Amara's chest loosened slightly. Not healing, not yet, but the beginning of it. Marcus hadn't died in vain. His work would continue. His truth would be known. By mid-afternoon, the impact had grown beyond containment. International implications triggered diplomatic inquiries. Environmental agencies launched emergency reviews of approved projects. Financial regulators froze assets connected to the identified shell companies. The carefully constructed network of Project Watershed began unraveling under the harsh light of global scrutiny. Your FBI contact Chen is being interviewed on CNN, Maya reported, monitoring the continuing coverage. She's confirming the interference in the Denmore investigation and calling for independent oversight of all related cases. Brave woman, Crane observed. She'll face significant blowback. She knew the risks, Amara replied. She chose justice anyway. As evening approached, their 12-hour window neared its conclusion. The safe house had served its purpose. The information was out, spreading faster than it could be suppressed, gathering momentum across multiple platforms and jurisdictions. What happens now? Amara asked as they prepared for their next moves. For me, disappearance, Crane replied matter-of-factly, gathering his minimal belongings. My usefulness in this particular battle is concluded. There will be others. And us? She directed the question to Luca, who had been coordinating their exit strategy with Maya. We surface, he answered, strategically, through legal counsel, with documented evidence of the threats against us. We transition from fugitives to protected witnesses. The approach made tactical sense. With the information now public across multiple channels, silencing them would only validate the conspiracy narrative. Their value as targets diminished with every passing hour of expanding coverage. Before departing, Crane approached Amara one final time. Your cousin would be proud, he said simply. Few people affect change on this scale, even at the cost he paid. It's not about pride, she replied. It's about truth, about consequences for those who thought themselves beyond accountability. Crane nodded once, understanding. The powerful rarely face true justice, Mrs. Moretti, but occasionally they face inconvenient truths. Today, you've ensured they cannot escape those. He left as he had operated throughout his career, silently, efficiently, without ceremony. Another shadow moving through a world of shadows, occasionally illuminating what needed to be seen. As night fell once more over Chicago, Amara stood with Luca at the window of the safe house, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, men and women who had considered themselves untouchable were now scrambling to distance themselves from Project Watershed. Evidence was being destroyed, alibis constructed, influence leveraged to ensure survivable outcomes. But it was too late. The truth had escaped containment. We should contact Chen, Amara said, decision made. Arrange formal protective custody and testimony. Luca nodded, his arm around her shoulders. On our terms. Always on our terms, she agreed, leaning into his strength. On the screens behind them, news coverage continued unabated. The largest environmental conspiracy in decades unfolding in real time. Marcus Taylor's name appeared with increasing frequency, his work recognized, his death no longer a footnote, but a central element in understanding the lengths to which power would go to protect itself. In the coming days, Amara would step from the shadows into the light of public testimony. She would speak Marcus's truth to power. She would ensure that what began with one man's determination to protect his community would end with accountability at the highest levels. The path ahead would not be easy. The powerful never surrendered without deploying every resource at their disposal. But she was no longer the invisible Maid, moving silently through marble halls. She had found her voice, her purpose, her power, as Chicago's lights reflected across Lake Michigan, the vast freshwater resource at the heart of the conspiracy. Amara thought of her cousin's favorite saying, water always finds a way through, around, or over any obstacle. Be like water. She had become the water, patient, persistent, unstoppable. And like water, she had found the cracks in the foundations of power and seeped through, gradually but inevitably weakening what once seemed impenetrable. The tide had turned. Truth was rising, and those who had built their empires on corruption would find no shoreline high enough to escape its reach. As dawn broke over Chicago 1 week later, Amara stood on the steps of the federal building, cameras flashing as she prepared to deliver her formal testimony to the Congressional Oversight Committee. Luca waited nearby, a steady presence as always. She thought of Marcus, his passion, his courage, his unwavering belief that one person's truth could change systems. She thought of the communities along the Great Lakes, whose water and futures would now be protected from those who sought to exploit them. And as she stepped forward to the microphones, Amara Johnson Moretti, no longer invisible, no longer silent, prepared to speak truth to power one final time. The tide had risen. Justice, like water, had found its way. Subscribe to The Maid Secret for more stories where silence becomes strength, and the underestimated rise higher than anyone ever imagined. Don't miss the next tale of power, dignity, and revenge that will leave you breathless.